we're back on our history of the First Republic. We're here on part 2. If for some reason you're starting here, go back last month, listen to part 1. I assume you've already paid for it if you're listening to this, so you can listen to both, so you have a better understanding of what is happening here in our time period. And when we left you last time, the people of the Caucasus had kind of, sort of, but not really broken away from the Russian Empire in the fires of the Russian Revolution. And while they had not declared independence, they had declared war against the Ottoman Empire as the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk loomed, at least as much as any non-state actor can declare war against another. Ottoman forces first stormed through the defenses manned by the Armenian Army Corps, manning the trenches left over by the shattered Russian army that advanced into Georgia, taking Batumi and closing in on the city of Kars. But before we go any further, it should come as no surprise that there is a lot going on in a very short amount of time. So I'm going to be talking about time periods that we've already talked about because these things are all happening kind of parallel to one another. Unless otherwise stated, I will give dates. So this can have some kind of narrative coherence.
If this was a reality TV, what could you compare this to?
I'm going to go Jersey Shore.
Jersey Shore.
Because I hate everybody involved.
I've only heard about it. I've never seen that. But like, to me, it's kind of more like, like the Real Housewives of, wherever,
The Real Housewives of the Southern Caucasus.
Yeah. It's just so messy. There's lots of scandals, disagreements, nothing ever seems to work out. So,
maybe Survivor, because there's challenges involved.
Oh my God.
People are getting voted off the island for sure. Or off the mountain, I suppose.
I mean, that is true. That is true if you wanted to make it sound a bit more serious, which, I mean, it is a serious topic. It's just quite interesting that this is very messy and like quite scandalous for a little amount of time that all of these events are taking place in. And I was telling a friend that we're working on this and, it's going to be, I mean, you might not know yet, but like 3 or 4 parts.
Yeah. Might last as long as the First Republic did.
Yeah. That's pretty much what they said. Like, so, I'm quite curious what we got on this episode. And I'm sure I'm going to learn something that I didn't know, because the way I learned this history, I learned it in Armenia. So, I mean, it's kind of safe to assume not everything found
totally
a place
unbiased.
there.
Yeah, totally unbiased.
Of course, totally unbiased. And, I'm sure that in those books, not just only stories of success and how we were the only victims. So please continue.
Yeah, never did anything wrong either.
No.
Like we talked about, the commissariat formed a kind of unified military, but there are parallel systems at work. Like I already talked about, the Armenian Army Corps. Now, the Army Corps was kind of, but not really, part of the Imperial Russian military. It was stood up with the goal of manning the Caucasus front, and their gains in the Ottoman Empire as the Russian state and military began to rapidly collapse, dissolved, and turned against itself into the Civil War. Facing the Ottoman Empire across the Caucasus front was the Armenian Army Corps. These were unified guys commanded by professional officers. Spoiler alert here, like most of the Armenian military, not our famed Furuyi, but we'll get there. And the Armenian Army Corps was commanded by a guy named General Thomas Nazarbekian. Nazarbekian is a perfect representation of Russification of minorities.
Mm-hmm.
He was born in what would have been Georgia, but he was a member of a Russified noble family.
Mm-hmm.
He was given an Armenian name at birth, but professionally was known by the name of Foma Nazarbekov.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm sure that name has Russified at some point.
Yes. This was pretty much his entire life. This is what he went by.
Mm-hmm.
Russian was his predominant language. He notably spoke Armenian with an accent.
Yeah, it is called internalized racism.
Yeah. Well, he goes the right direction with this. He rises up throughout the Russian military, Russian society. He attends Russian Military Academy. He's an officer in the Imperial Army. And by the time of our story here, he's a major general. And he's the first ever Army Chief of Staff in Armenian national history. Under him was Andronik.
Yeah, that one I know.
Yeah. Full name, Andronik Ozanian, obviously known by Armenians by the simple name Andronik. He has been fighting virtually nonstop for the better part of 20 years at this point, in one war or another, or failing that as, a Dashnak partisan against the Ottoman Empire. He was originally from Western Armenia. He traveled all over the Ottoman Empire, joining literally any revolutionary movement that was rising up against them. At one point, he's in the Balkans War. He finds himself in Bulgaria. He joins a revolutionary Macedonian movement.
What?
He's literally just in it for the love of the game.
Oh my God.
If anybody's fighting the Ottoman Empire, he's like, count me in.
Yes. I mean, that part I know. I just didn't really know the specifics, of North Macedonia. I think that's just... I mean, I don't think I've learned that before, but Andronik is a very, very famous name, an important name in the Armenian history.
And thankfully, an unproblematic one. We got one.
Yeah, exactly. Once in a while, we got to get one who's not at least generally considered to be problematic.
Unlike the next two we're going to talk about.
Shit.
Outside of the Army Corps, who is important to remember here, are trained and as professional soldiers as any country has during World War I. There are volunteers. These are commonly known in lore as the Fidei. The Fidei in general also had something resembling a standardized military training regimen. These were not just farmers with guns. They sometimes fell under the command of the Army Corps. Sometimes they didn't. There was a serious rift between the two of them, and that's mostly due to Nazarbakian. Not because he didn't like the volunteers, because the volunteers didn't necessarily like him.
Yeah,
he wasn't a Dashnak, though he palled around with them often. He's, as we often say in our mainline series, the greater unifying theory of fuck that guy.
Right.
He had a lot of differences with the Dashnaks, and the Dashnaks really didn't like him. But as far as Nazarbakian's concerned, it's like, this is a problem for later.
Yeah.
Understandable. And that brings us to the commanders generally of the volunteers. Rastamat Kanyan and Gagarin Nezhda. Two guys we have certainly talked about on the show before, specifically about what they would do in the future, say around the 1940s. It's important to remember at this point in history, they are not fascists, or at least not really. They were both Dashnaks, whose ideology we talked about in our last episode is as confusing then as it arguably still is today.
Yeah.
Though they are not where they would be. Hell, Nezhda, despite eventually turning into a virulent racist and a Nazi, was leading a combined Armenian Yazidi volunteer unit at this point.
Yeah.
For people who are not aware, Armenians and Yazidis have historically been, for a lack of a better term, bros. Nezhda called the two people brothers, but with a different god. And that's a common thought to this day.
Yeah.
Before the ISIS genocide against Yazidis, which caused hundreds of thousands of Yazidis to flee into Europe, the largest population outside of Iraq is in Armenia. And the largest Yazidi temple in the world is about 35 kilometers outside of Yerevan.
Right. Yeah. And it was built actually fairly recently.
Yeah. Like the last 15 years, something like that.
Yeah. I don't exactly remember when, but I remember that being built. And yeah, the relations.
Not saying there's not problems, but largely speaking,
it's very,
bros.
Yes, very friendly. And they're largely just left their own demise. They do what they want. And I mean, there can be some problems with that because, underage marriages and stuff, but that happens. And largely, I mean, not just in Yazidi communities, in Armenian communities too, but often when it comes to the Yazidi communities, they're like, oh, we're just not kind of doing our jobs because we're just leaving them to be, which is not always the case. And don't conscript them into the army, and don't do all this other kind of stuff. So there's a bit of a double standard, but generally, they are a well-accepted community within Armenia, and that's a good thing.
They're like one of the only people other than Armenians that are considered as close to indigenous to Armenia as Armenians are by Armenians.
I didn't even know Yazidis were a different nation growing up, man. I had no idea. We would have like neighbors who would have slightly different sounding names, and you wouldn't necessarily question that a lot. You just thought that they had let's say a funny name, because when you were a child, everybody's name is a funny name. My name was a funny name, and it's one of the most common names that people were born in, early 90s.
Yeah.
Women born in early 90s.
There's like an 80% chance every Armenian woman you meet in the 30s, in her 30s, is named Ani at this point.
Yes, or Lilith, can Lilith, go either or, okay? That there were options, show. And I just remember not even thinking of them as a different nation, as different in any way. It's like, maybe if someone is making fun of this person's name, because they were making fun of my name.
Yeah.
Like it was just something childish to do. You never saw it.
You don't really understand they're making fun of it because it sounds different.
No, similarly with, very limited amount of Kurds we have, or like Moluccans, that they call in Armenia. Like these are all different nations, and we just had no idea. We just thought maybe they had one or two different customs, and that's maybe what makes them a Yazidi. Not that they're an entirely different ethnicity.
I discovered for myself, of course, being an ignorant diasporan who knows nothing about Armenia, when I moved there, I had rented a car and I was driving in that direction and got lost because my phone wasn't working. It's kind of a dead zone.
Right.
The Yazidi village is quite rural. And I pulled over to ask for directions, and I was immediately struck like, well, that's a weird looking church. Because it's a very impressive temple. It's very, very cool looking, but it's
Church got a facelift.
Yeah, but it's very different from like your normal
Yes.
Armenian village church.